At 1:30 in the morning, I saw a man dancing alone beneath a streetlight in the middle of an empty city street. At first, I thought he was drunk or mentally unstable. Then he stopped moving completely and smiled directly at me. Not a normal smile. The kind of smile that instantly makes your stomach drop before your brain even understands why. What happened over the next few minutes permanently changed how I see empty streets at night. Because some people aren't terrifying because they attack you. Some are terrifying because every instinct inside you knows something about them is deeply, horribly wrong. About 5 years ago, I lived alone in a busy downtown area inside a major American city. I worked late shifts almost every night, and over time my sleep schedule became completely ruined. Most people were finishing dinner or getting ready for bed around midnight, while I was usually just getting home from work trying to relax. Because of that, I developed a strange habit of taking long walks through the city after midnight to clear my head before sleeping. Those walks slowly became part of my daily routine. Honestly, I started enjoying the city more at night than during the daytime. During the day, everything felt crowded, loud, stressful, and rushed. Car horns echoed constantly. Sidewalks stayed packed with people. Everyone seemed angry or exhausted. But after midnight, the city transformed into something completely different. The streets became quieter. Traffic slowly faded away. Bars emptied one group at a time, while distant music echoed through side streets. Train stations sounded hollow and eerie instead of crowded. Even the cold air felt calmer somehow. For nearly 4 years, I walked alone through those streets without anything dangerous ever happening to me. I passed homeless people, drunk strangers, empty alleyways, dark parks, and silent intersections hundreds of times without problems. That consistency created a false sense of safety in my mind. I genuinely believed I knew the city well enough to recognize danger immediately. That confidence is probably why I ignored my instincts at first that night. Because when everything changed, the city looked exactly the same as it always had. Quiet sidewalks, yellow streetlights reflecting off wet pavement, cold air moving between buildings, empty intersections stretching into darkness, completely normal. Then I turned onto a narrow side street beside a small park and noticed someone moving strangely beneath a streetlight ahead of me. At first, I honestly assumed the person standing beneath the streetlight was just drunk. That wasn't unusual for the area, especially after bars closed for the night around 1 in the morning. I had seen all kinds of strange people wandering through the city late at night before. Some shouted at nobody. Some argued loudly with friends. Some sang while stumbling through intersections, barely able to stand upright. Normally, I ignored them and kept walking without thinking twice about it. So when I first noticed movement beneath the streetlight ahead of me, I didn't immediately feel afraid. I just assumed it was another intoxicated stranger acting weird after a long night. But the closer I got, the stranger the entire situation started to feel. The man standing beneath the light was incredibly tall and painfully thin. Not skinny in a normal way either. His body looked unnaturally narrow, almost stretched. His arms and legs seemed too long beneath an old dark suit that looked completely out of place for the time period. The clothing reminded me of something from decades earlier, like an outfit pulled from an old black and white photograph. The suit jacket hung awkwardly from his shoulders, while the pants sat slightly too high above his ankles. Even from a distance, something about his appearance looked deeply wrong beneath that yellow street light. But what truly bothered me wasn't the way he looked. It was the way he moved. At first, I thought he was dancing normally. But after watching him for a few seconds, I realized nothing about those movements looked human or natural. His dancing was jerky, uneven, and strangely violent. One second he kicked his legs absurdly high into the air with unnatural speed. The next second he twisted sharply sideways, while swinging his arms too hard like a puppet being yanked around by invisible strings. Every movement looked broken somehow. Nothing flowed naturally. His body snapped between motions too quickly and at strange angles that made my stomach tighten immediately. And through all of it, he never stopped smiling. Not a happy smile either. It stretched unnaturally wide across his face, like he was forcing his mouth open painfully. The expression never changed, no matter how violently he moved beneath the streetlight. But the worst part wasn't even the smile. It was his eyes. The entire time he danced, his eyes stayed pointed upward toward the sky, instead of looking ahead normally. Wide open, completely unblinking. As if he was staring at something above the buildings that only he could see. And the moment I noticed that detail, every instinct inside me quietly started screaming to leave immediately. The fear hit me slowly at first. I told myself he was probably mentally unstable or heavily intoxicated. Still, every instinct inside me said to avoid him immediately. I crossed the street casually because I didn't want him thinking I was nervous. I kept my pace steady and tried acting normal while moving onto the opposite sidewalk. For a few seconds, I avoided looking directly at him because I hoped the situation would feel less disturbing if I ignored it. Then I glanced back over my shoulder. The second I looked at him again, the dancing stopped completely. Instantly. The man froze in place beneath the streetlight, with one foot slightly raised off the ground. His body faced directly toward me now. His arms hung loosely at his sides, but somehow, his eyes still pointed upward toward the sky instead of looking at me normally. That impossible smile never moved even slightly. A wave of cold panic spread through my chest immediately. I started walking faster while pretending everything was fine. I didn't want him realizing how uncomfortable I had become. After about half a block, I briefly looked ahead to check traffic crossing the next intersection. Maybe 10 seconds passed at most. But when I looked back again, the streetlight was empty. The man had completely disappeared. For one short moment, relief flooded through me. Then I noticed movement in the shadows across the street. He was crouched beside a parked car much closer than before. I still cannot explain how he covered that distance so quickly without making noise. One moment he stood nearly half a street away beneath the light. The next moment he crouched in the darkness less than 20 feet from me. His body looked folded unnaturally low, like some kind of animal preparing to move. Even from that distance, I could still see the grin stretched across his face beneath the shadows. My heart immediately started pounding harder. Something deep inside me understood this situation had become genuinely dangerous. Then slowly, the man stood upright again. The smiling man began moving toward me, but the way he moved only made the fear worse. He didn't run. He didn't walk normally either. He started tiptoeing toward me with huge, exaggerated steps, like a cartoon character sneaking across a room. His arms dangled loosely beside him, while his body leaned awkwardly forward. Somehow, despite those ridiculous movements, he moved unbelievably fast. Far faster than anyone should have been able to move, stepping like that. The silence around us made everything worse. No cars passed nearby. No voices echoed from buildings. The city suddenly felt completely empty, except for the two of us standing beneath those dim street lights. Every instinct inside me screamed to run immediately, but fear locked my body in place. I couldn't stop staring at him as he got closer and closer. By this point, my body had fully entered panic mode, even though my brain still tried forcing logical explanations onto the situation. I remember telling myself maybe he was on drugs. Maybe he was mentally ill. Maybe he just enjoyed frightening strangers at night. But none of those explanations actually matched what I was seeing. Human beings simply don't move that way. The closer he came, the more unnatural everything about him looked beneath the streetlights. His limbs bent strangely during every exaggerated step. His posture leaned too far forward. And somehow, his eyes still never looked directly at me once. They remained fixed upward toward the sky, while that horrible smile stretched wider and wider across his face. The expression didn't even look emotional anymore. It looked mechanical, like his face had become stuck that way permanently. I wanted to scream at him to stay back, but fear completely destroyed my voice. My chest felt tight. My hands shook uncontrollably. My legs felt weak and heavy at the same time. When he finally stopped moving, he stood only a few feet away from me in the middle of the empty sidewalk. The city around us had gone completely silent. We stayed there staring at each other beneath the flickering streetlights, while my heartbeat slammed violently inside my chest. I have never felt fear that intense before or since that night. The silence was honestly worse than if he had screamed at me. Something about the complete absence of sound made the entire situation feel unreal. No passing traffic, no distant sirens, no voices from apartments nearby. It felt like the entire city had frozen around us for those few seconds. I stared directly at the smiling man, while trying desperately to understand what I was looking at. Up close, his face looked pale beneath the yellow light, almost gray in some places. His eyes remained wide open without blinking once, and somehow, despite standing only feet away from me, he still refused to look directly at my face. His gaze remained pointed upward toward the night sky, while that impossible grin stayed carved across his mouth. I finally forced myself to speak because the silence had become unbearable. I wanted to sound aggressive and confident. I wanted to scare him away before he attacked me. Instead, fear cracked my voice immediately. All I managed to say was, "What the hell do you want?" The words sounded weak the second they left my mouth. The smiling man gave absolutely no reaction at all. No blink, no movement, no response. He simply stood there, smiling silently. Then after several long seconds, he slowly turned around without saying a word and started dancing away from me again with those same broken, puppet-like movements, disappearing farther down the street. For a few seconds, relief hit me so hard it almost made my knees weak. I genuinely thought the encounter had ended. I started convincing myself that maybe he was simply disturbed and had finally lost interest in me. The farther away he moved, the safer I felt. I carefully backed away while keeping my eyes locked on him the entire time. I didn't trust him enough to turn around completely. The smiling man kept dancing farther down the road beneath the dim lights, while his movements remained just as unnatural as before. I remember noticing how empty the streets still looked around us. No cars, no pedestrians, no movement from nearby buildings. The entire area felt abandoned despite being inside a major city. Then suddenly, the dancing stopped again, completely motionless. He stood at the far end of the street with his back facing me. Every instinct inside my body immediately tightened again. Slowly, his body tilted forward at an angle that looked physically uncomfortable. His arms dangled loosely beside him, while his head remained pointed upward toward the sky. I instantly realized he was preparing to move again. Terror exploded through my chest before he even started running. That smile never changed once. Then, without warning, he launched himself directly toward me at full speed, with the most unnatural running motion I have ever seen in my life. The second he started running, survival instinct completely took over my body. I turned and sprinted immediately, without thinking. I have never run that fast before, in my entire life. Behind me, I could hear his footsteps slamming violently against the pavement, while his strange, uneven movements echoed through the empty street. I didn't dare look back, because I knew seeing him again would completely break me mentally. My lungs started burning almost instantly as panic flooded through every part of my body. I sprinted toward the nearest busy intersection because I desperately needed light, traffic, people, anything that felt normal. While running, I nearly slipped beside parked cars and trash bins because fear had completely destroyed my coordination. The worst part was the sound behind me. His footsteps didn't sound steady like a normal person running. They sounded chaotic and uneven, like his limbs moved incorrectly while sprinting. Yet despite that, he was incredibly fast. I genuinely believed he was about to grab me at any second. My heart pounded so hard I thought I might collapse before reaching safety. Every terrible possibility flashed through my head while I ran through those empty streets. I honestly believed I was seconds away from dying or disappearing into the darkness with whatever that thing actually was behind me. Eventually, I reached a brighter intersection filled with traffic lights, passing cars, and a few late-night businesses still open nearby. The sudden noise and light felt unreal after the terrifying silence of the side streets behind me. I nearly collapsed beside a traffic pole while gasping desperately for air. My entire body shook uncontrollably from adrenaline. For several seconds, I couldn't force myself to turn around because I was terrified of what I might see charging toward me from the darkness. Finally, after struggling to breathe normally again, I looked back down the road. The street behind me was completely empty. No footsteps, no movement, no tall man in an old suit. Nothing. The entire road looked perfectly normal again, like the encounter had never happened. Somehow, that terrified me even more. There was simply no way he could have disappeared that quickly. I stood there scanning the shadows for several minutes, expecting him to suddenly appear beneath another streetlight nearby. But the road remained silent and empty. I stayed near crowded areas for nearly an hour before finally returning home through the busiest streets possible. Every shadow made my chest tighten after that. Every distant movement made me panic. Even after reaching my apartment safely, I couldn't stop replaying that smile over and over inside my head for the rest of the night. I stayed in that city for another 6 months after the encounter. But I never walked alone late at night again. Not once. Before that night, those walks had become part of my normal routine. They helped me relax after work and clear my head before sleeping. But after seeing the smiling man beneath those streetlights, the entire city felt different to me. Streets that once felt peaceful suddenly felt dangerous and empty in the worst possible way. Every quiet intersection started making me nervous. Every shadow beside a building caught my attention. Even hearing distant footsteps behind me made my heart race instantly. Friends laughed whenever I briefly described the story because it sounded ridiculous saying it out loud. A dancing man in an old suit with a creepy smile didn't sound terrifying on paper. Honestly, I probably would have laughed too if someone else told me the same thing years earlier. But they didn't see him. They didn't watch the way he moved beneath those flickering streetlights. They didn't feel that overwhelming instinctive certainty that something deeply wrong was standing directly in front of them. Even years later, small things still trigger the memory immediately. Empty intersections after midnight, flickering lights inside parking garages, someone smiling too long in public without blinking. Sometimes I still wake up remembering the sound of those footsteps racing toward me through the darkness while I ran for my life. And honestly, the worst part isn't even the fear anymore. The worst part is the feeling I had while staring at him during those silent moments beneath the streetlight. Deep down, I truly believed the smiling man enjoyed terrifying me. Like watching fear slowly take over, another person was exactly what he wanted. That smile never looked human to me. It looked performative, forced, almost predatory. I still don't know who or what I encountered that night. Maybe he was mentally disturbed. Maybe he was dangerous. Or maybe he was something far stranger than I want to believe. But one thing still feels absolutely certain in my mind all these years later. Whatever I saw beneath those streetlights wasn't normal. And if I had frozen instead of running when he charged toward me, I honestly don't think I would still be here talking about it today. If you saw someone standing alone at 1:30 in the morning smiling like that, would you freeze or run immediately? Comment below. And remember this carefully. If someone starts dancing toward you in an empty street late at night, don't stop to figure out what they want. Some encounters are safer left unexplained. Sleep carefully tonight, because you never really know who's watching once the streets go quiet.